Hello and welcome to this episode of the Cancer Diaries from Wessex Cancer Trust. This series has been put together for Wessex Cancer Trust's ActionMan campaign. ActionMan is a men's health campaign which will encourage men to be aware of the signs and symptoms of cancer and to contact their GP if they have any concerns. It's an opportunity to hear from a number of men about their experiences of cancer, but also to take a deeper look at some of the issues around men contacting their GP and what might need to happen for them to feel a little bit easier about opening up. Today, we're talking to Philip Dinn, a retired environmental health practitioner and acoustic consultant, and Philip also sits on the Wessex Cancer Trust Action Man Committee. Welcome, Philip, and thank you very much for joining us for the interview today.
Hi, Sam.
Hi. So perhaps firstly, we could just start by talking a little bit about your personal experience of cancer.
Yeah, well, my personal experience of cancer sort of started off as a bit of a whimper and ended up with a bang, really. Initially, it was a question of thinking that, as I was getting older, like many men, and thinking, okay, I'm beginning to get some symptoms that could be prostate cancer. So I better get these checked out. So went down to the doctors and carried out the various tests there, and they took some blood samples, and then I got a confirmation a few days later, no problem. So I thought, great, that's it. However, it did also confirm that I then was now likely to be developing diabetes type 2, diet-controlled diabetes, which was in the family, so it came as no great surprise. So after the initial sort of point where cancer had sort of kicked it off, if you like, but then has shown there wasn't a problem, I then had the diabetes bit, which went on for about 18 months or so, and then I had a routine blood test one day, and that night, in fact, I got a phone call from the GP saying to contact the GP immediately. And I thought, oh, the old blood sugar's gone a bit, off here.
Yeah.
And but then they said no. I said, well, I'll make an appointment. They said, no, we want you in now, straight away. I said, well, straight away now? And they said, yeah. So I trolled up, and basically said that the blood sample had shown that my red blood cell count was well down, which would obviously be accounting for feeling a bit tired as well because of lack of oxygen, etc. But more importantly, my immune system was completely shot. It just wasn't anything there. I mean, I looked at the results, and it sort of gives you a sort of a level because it was all on the computer, I could see it. And so then immediately sort of got sent off to Southampton General, carried out a few more tests, and basically within a matter of weeks, I was informed that I'd actually got something called myelodysplastic syndrome, which is basically blood cancer with a very high risk of developing into leukemia. And that it needed some pretty urgent action. So from there, it was a question of straight into hospital for some fairly intensive chemo for something like 6 weeks, and then another bout of that, and then catching an infection, and then finally ending up with a bone marrow stem cell transplant, which is now something like 2.5 years ago. And that was from an anonymous living donor, I might say, because the whole thing's quite incredible when it comes down to stem cells and how that operates. So it sort of started off with one sort of potential cancer scare that led me to something else. But then, had I not been there to actually get the blood sample that was really been taken for the diabetes, then I would have been dead within a matter of months, quite literally, because I didn't have an immune system that was working. I would have caught pneumonia or something similar. And that, quite bluntly, would have been what was on the death certificate: died of pneumonia or some sort of infection. Because the actual cancer, the blood cancer, doesn't actually kill you directly, not like a disease that affects you. It just allows everything else to come in and finish it off. So that was my story, really.
And quite an incredible story to start by going to the doctor for something that, you know, was innocuous and ended up then, you know, having a huge impact on your life and what you had to cope with.
Yeah, but that's amazing how you start to realise, especially as you get older, that how little things sometimes develop elsewhere. And sometimes the path you end up on isn't the one you thought you were going on. But it was just as well you started off in the first place, because you wouldn't have got there otherwise. So, but of course, you don't know where you're going to end up.
Of course not. Of course not. And can you remember how you felt initially when you were making appointments to see your GP? Have you ever felt reluctant to see your GP or worried about sort of opening up about any symptoms you've got?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that I think sort of, I mean, probably generally, but I don't want to generalise too much of this sort of thing. But certainly for my background, I've been very active in originally doing potholing and then climbing and then ended up sailing. And although I'd never actually hurt myself doing all these activities, I was very conscious of the fact that if I was going to be up to the doctor, it would probably something like a broken something or other.
Yes.
And that's how. So I think men sort of tend to look upon things that happen to them, whereas something that you can't actually put your finger on is not the sort of thing that gets you to go to a doctor unless you can be a bit more definite about something. It's the and ironically, it was the fact that I thought about the prostate cancer was just purely that it was one of those sort of little things in the back of my mind that someone I used to work with, or a group of people I used to work with, we'd gone sailing somewhere for a week, got a charter boat, and it was just one of those conversations that happened as a result of just being active and saying things and doing things. It didn't come out of a looking for that problem. It was, and I just remember him saying, yeah, he was so pleased that he'd actually been detected and got it sorted. And I think his last words were to all of us were, you know, if you think you've got a problem, go and sort it. And that stuck in my mind, really.
Why do you think some men don't go to the doctor if they think there might be something wrong?
I think it is this thing about when you say something wrong, it's that vagueness which is that men don't particularly respond to. If it was something a bit actual, something fairly definite, then you start to think, okay, this is something serious. But I think maybe we need that sort of something a bit positive. When I say positive, I don't mean good necessarily, but I mean something definite, and that's something, and then we know that we need to take control of it.
Okay. Yeah. So what do you think would help more men go to contact their GP if they suspect there might be something up, whatever that might be, whether it's, you know, a vague symptom or they just don't feel quite right? I mean, there's still valid reasons, aren't they, to contact your GP if you think there might be something wrong?
Yeah, but I think I think that a lot of men probably need that something a bit more definite. It is this vagueness bit. It's just like, oh well, we get over it. We can deal with this. It's just one of those things that happens, or you know, a whole load of things like that. It's when it starts to solidify for some reason. That's certainly what I felt like. You know, that's what would push me to go to the doctors.
Do you think maybe then there's an education? It's interesting having your perspective, actually,
Yeah.
because in the other interviews we've done, the chaps have said, you know, or perhaps it's because, you know, men generally don't like to think that there's something wrong with them. They might bury their head in the sand. They might be thinking that they have a certain role to fill within the family, that, you know, mustn't compromise, you know, their strength or how brave they are. But actually, maybe you're saying that there's also an education thing there, that, you know, if you know, you think something feels a little bit different in your body, even if it's vague, then, you know, perhaps it's worth educating yourself more on perhaps the signs and symptoms of common male cancers, for example. Perhaps that might be a barrier as well.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, that's what I'm really thinking, is that if we can actually, if people are actually aware of the symptoms and can actually put a finger on it and say, right, that's possibly what it's about, then it gives you that reason for going to the doctor. And I think the point that you were saying about maybe how they feel about within their relationships is an issue we might come to in a minute, maybe. But but I do think that can be very important. But I think for a lot of people, it's that it's not a broken leg's fine. You can see it,
of course.
And it's something definite. I think that it is actually quantifying in some way what it is. So actual symptoms, I mean, when I say vagueness, I mean, there is this vague thing, you don't feel well, but then you think, oh yeah, it's the man flu stuff and all this sort of thing. You know, so you get put off by this thing about vagueness, because men don't like to go and just say, I just don't feel very well.
No.
There needs to be a bit more to it. So an awareness and an awareness of the symptoms is something is very important, because it then gives that reason for going. And I think that for me is to go to doctors. It's the sort of thing that you don't do normally.
No.
It's the sort of thing that, you know, to me, going to the doctor just brings me back to, it's the sort of place I used to go to with my mum when I wasn't well. And then you get this gap in between where doctors are places that you don't normally go to unless you've actually got something that you can identify with. And then you start to realise there are things which aren't necessarily quite so obvious, but nonetheless start to become obvious.
I think that's a really interesting point. And it sort of makes you think, doesn't it, about, yes, you know, having a broken leg, it's very physical. You know, having cancer is something completely different. There's a stigma still within men, and men, you know, about saying, I've got cancer.
I don't know about the stigma, but having actually discussed this with this whole project with other people I know, I've suddenly realised there are an awful lot more people who have had cancer at some point, who didn't necessarily say much about it, which I won't say it's a shame, because that's not true, but it was the reason that someone I spoke to years ago about the prostate cancer that made me think, yes, I need to get this checked out. It's and it's the sort of thing that even you know, when I was walking on the Walk for Hope a couple of years ago, and a couple of cyclists came by, and they said, basically, you know, who are you, what you're doing? There's all these people walking around the forest here, wearing these T-shirts, and I explained to them what it's about, and you know how I'd been affected by it, basically. And this guy just turned to the other guy, and he was a similar sort of age, and he just said, "Oh, that bowel cancer test that I had that came in the other day, perhaps I'll do it after all." And I thought, yeah, go home and do it, pal.
Yeah,
Sort of,
yeah. And it could
you know,
have, and that chance meeting could have been the one thing that, you know, that
could be.
would have made a massive difference to him.
It could be. So, although I think, I mean, if I talk about my experiences, it's not because I particularly want to. It's because I feel it might help someone else.
Yes. Yeah.
But there is, if you like, that it still needs a reason for me doing it.
Yes.
And,
Yeah.
and for me, it is that if I help someone else through this, fine.
Yeah.
Because I know when I got that MDS position, I was in hospital so quick. I had no idea what it was about. I was completely at sea with the whole thing. I had no idea about survival rates and all this sort of stuff. I'd been given piles of paper to look at, but it meant absolutely nothing.
No. No.
Until I actually spoke to somebody who had actually had it. Then
Yeah.
I thought, oh, right, so it does exist.
Yeah. Yeah. And that the experience you had must have been incredibly worrying for your family as well.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I think that this might sound a bit sexist, but men need to think about in particular in relation to how they affect their partners, and if it's a wife, partner, or whatever, because it does have an impact. I mean, I know mine. One of the reasons that I think can possibly not drive people, but I'd say to a lot of men, look, you need to sort this out. Because you need to think about the impact on your family or your friends or anyone else. Come to that. I mean, there is a knock-on effect, which means that it's not just you; it's how it then affects other people. And I mean, I quite clearly remember when I was at the point where I actually got the final diagnosis. I was in hospital with my wife at the time, and I thought something was a bit up because we were now being pushed up the medical chain to the top consultant, and there was an extra chair brought in for someone I recognised as wearing a Macmillan nursing gear, and I thought, oh, this is not going to look good.
This is not great.
And I distinctly remember the impact I got when I was actually told that it was a matter of a couple of months, basically, before I knew about the transplant option at that point. And I sort of went into a bit of a shell shock feeling about it.
Okay.
But the effect of my wife was I could hear her. Her anguish, I could see the effect on her, and I could feel it, and that, strangely enough, actually pulled me out of a sort of a bit of a what's happening position. I didn't really understand anything at that minute. It was all a bit of a shock, quite literally, to thinking I've got to do something about this. I've got to regain control. I've got to make this work. For not just for me, but for her. So if men sort of think about that impact before you get to that point, because when you get to that point, it's all a bit bloody late. So, you need to sort of think ahead and think, well, what impact would this have?
Yeah, definitely. It's the much bigger picture, isn't it, that you need to think about in these situations. And I know from talking to some men who have very kindly shared their experiences with me that a lot of the time it has been their wife or their partner or another loved one, a female in their life, that has said, "Come on, you need to go to the doctor. Have you made that appointment yet?" And just keep. I don't like to use the word nagging, but some people have and said they've nagged me to go. What do you think a woman's role could be in ActionMan?
Well, Well, I think you've got several points in there which are absolutely spot on. And one, the term need is that for a lot of men, they're going to feel in a relationship they actually sounds a bit weird, but need to be needed.
Yeah.
There has to be a purpose in this relationship, which gives some sort of a role, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
And for and that role needn't necessarily be, if you like, the top breadwinner, the great protection, and all, the sort of like the old sort of looking at a man's role in the family, and it may be in a supportive role, even with a with with the wife, who maybe gets more money. It may be you're the wind under my wings approach.
Yeah.
That you can be equally strong and supportive and needed to help to actually sort of get that feeling, if you like, from relationship, rather than necessarily being in charge and dominating it. It's not the role of being needed is fairly broad, and I think for any women to actually express that in some way to a man and say, look, it's not a question of nagging you. I need you to do this because I'm worried that if things go wrong, I'm going to be left, and I need you. I need to know that you've got control of this.
Yes.
I'm not saying I rely upon you, but you need. If you say to the man, look, I need you to actually get me through this as well, and that can be quite a powerful sentiment, I think, on a lot of men anyway.
Yeah, yeah. So just going back to ActionMan, how do you think it can change things? What needs to happen, do you think?
I think it is the awareness bit is incredibly important, so that men do understand the symptoms or possible symptoms, and I think actually men talking about it is a big incentive to a lot of other men to think, okay, well, perhaps I'll get something done about it after all. Not and to know that things also can go quite seriously wrong. From hearing from other people that so from the action, from ActionMan to actually work, I guess it's really a question of, it is raising awareness, and then it's encouraging men to actually think, okay, what am I going to do about this? Am I just going to sit around and keep, head in the sand approach, or am I going to take control of this? Am I going to sort this out? Am I just going to carry on letting it just go, okay, maybe, or am I going to deal with it?
Yes, yeah.
Because, it's not, it's almost like saying, a lot of our culture is all about competition and winning. Especially in the sports field, that's basically, But of course, it doesn't have to be a team event to win something. The wanting to actually to win in some way goes a lot deeper. It's overcoming things. It's actually doing something far more to it. And I think if men feel that they need to actually take control of this by understanding what the symptoms are, hearing more about it from other people, and then doing something about it.
And I guess there are two sides, aren't there? I guess there's the measurable thing that might be shown in the number of men who are contacting their GP and going to see them if they have any concerns, but also something that's perhaps not going to be measured quite as easily by just changing some sort of perceptions or attitudes about getting people to talk about it a little bit more, about and being a little bit more open, and perhaps encouraging their friends to to go to the GP if they suspect something wrong. What do you think you would say to a friend of yours if they said, look, you know, I've got something that's niggling me, it's worrying me a little bit, I can't put my finger on exactly what it is, but you know, I'm a little bit concerned. What would you say to a close friend of yours?
Oh, definitely go and get some expert advice. Try and actually focus a bit on what it is that's actually making you feel like this, and then do something about it. And basically, don't, you know, in the words of Fools and Horses, don't be a plonker, Rodney. You can sort it. You know, be so bloody foolish, inept, and incompetent. Get out there and do something about it. Stop whinging about it. Go and do it.
And it sounds quite simple, doesn't it? But we know, you know, there are many people don't. So But
it is this. Why do you want to go and do this? And if you just do it for yourself, then maybe that's not necessarily a very good reason for doing it. You need to have other reasons as well.
Yeah, definitely. And what if people want to get involved in ActionMan? How could they?
Well, I don't know. I mean, from a purely personal point of view, I guess it's obviously Wessex Cancer Trust is going to have some information set up on its website, etc. If you like, from a formal point of view, but just from an informal point of view, just for men, I guess, who've been through some sort of system like that, something to do with cancer, is only just to be open about it. And of course, it doesn't have to be, when we're talking about men going in and cancer, it isn't necessarily just male cancers. They're not necessarily the biggest killer of men when it comes to cancer. It could equally be that really nasty cough. And you know, it needs looking at. You know, it's a bit more to it. And of course, that does something like that raises fears, especially if you've been a smoker and you think, oh God, I'm going to get blamed now for what I did, whatever. But it's thinking ahead again. It's not trying to. And so that I think for any person, say, getting involved with ActionMan campaign is so talk about it. It's probably one of the biggest things.
Yeah, I think so. Thank you, Philip. That's been incredibly insightful, and thank you very much for being so open about your experiences as well. I know that will be helpful to a lot of people, and also to say thank you for being such a big supporter of Wessex Cancer Trust over the years. I know that you have, you know, you've taken part in Walk for Hope, as you mentioned, and you've been a big supporter to us. So thank you very much for all of that over the years.
And I can just say, for things like the Walk for Hope, I mean, that really was, to me, that really was a fairly major sort of goal. You know, when you're at the lowest point, you need something to focus on, and that, you know, for me, it had been coincidentally the fact that I'd actually been in contact with, or Wessex Cancer Trust been in contact with me when I was president of the New Forest Rotary Club. And we talked about setting up how we could actually support that particular event the first time round. And it was only a matter of months later that all of a sudden I found out that I was going to be probably something that was a bit more than I realised. So, it's having that beacon of hope somewhere. And it is hope. That's a massive word, that hope.
Yeah, it really is. It is. Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, I hope you've found this episode useful. And don't forget, if you need any more information about the signs and symptoms of common male cancers, or you'd like just to get in touch, or you'd like a little bit of support, please head to www.actionman.wessexcancer.org.uk.